Hello, you're tuning in to Awani Review with me, Cynthia. Today we will be discussing about the changing face of education. With the rise of online learning platforms and impressive language models like ChatGPT, for example, there's been a lot of talk about traditional degrees and business schools and whether they still hold their ground. And joining me right here at the Asia School of Business, we have the renowned Mr. Sanjay Sarma, who is the CEO, President and Dean of the Asia School of Business. Thank you so much for having us here.
Such a pleasure.
First of all, congratulations on your fairly recent appointment to become CEO, President and Dean of ASB. We're curious to find out what motivated you to move from MIT in Boston all the way to here in Kuala Lumpur.
Well, I'm Asian, so I'm back in Asia. I think Malaysia is in a very special place. ASB is a young school. Education, as we'll talk about it, requires some significant changes. And ASB is in a position to launch those changes. So I'm very excited about it.
Okay. Well, it's quite a transition that you made from MIT, which is renowned for its vibrant, innovative culture, and coming to Malaysia with a very different, vastly different aspect in terms of education and also culture. How has it been for you?
That's been great. I think people here are very energetic. I think there's a huge opportunity. Asia's on the rise, so very exciting.
And when you talk about Asia on the rise, what specifically are you excited about, being in Malaysia and helming ASB?
Well, I mean, look, 670, give or take, million people in ASEAN. It's more than Western Europe and North America combined. The geopolitics of the region are changing. Trade routes are changing. There's a huge consumer class. There's so much diversity here in terms of language, religion, countries, laws. Very exciting petri dish to really bring new education paradigms to.
Well, just staying on that a bit, with your background at MIT, 27 years, you told me earlier, what kind of, how do you envision bringing some of that kind of culture over here to ASB?
We need to get not just ASB, but also Malaysia, I think is on the cusp, as I said. We need to build buzz. There's a lot of creativity here, but it isn't obvious. And we need to bring it together. We need to nucleate it. It's like a chain reaction. You need to have more events, more entrepreneurs, more talks, more startups, more funding, more ideas, more people meeting other people, more of a mix, more of a vortex. And we have to create that here at ASB. We've already started, but I think KL could use some of that too. I think it's such a fantastic, fertile place for all this to happen.
Okay, now when you talk about that, bringing things together, talk to us about your plans.
So, one of the things we want to do is really invigorate this building with a lot of innovation. So our ground floor is a real test bed for that. Bring in startups,
right.
Bring in venture, bring in also boot camps and other ways to invigorate startups and innovative thinking. On campus, we want to take a more hybrid approach to education. We want to have, of course, our most prized students, our MBA students, but also engage more with the local and international community. Artificial intelligence and technology are really creating a new appetite for learning. We want to tap into that, provide it. We want to have events here. We recently had an artificial intelligence AI summit where we had hundreds of people and we had visitors from all over the world actually, and speakers from MIT and other places talking about the future of AI. We had a student go up and write code for a website which ordinarily would have taken 3 months. He did it in 10 minutes. So it was that sort of chain reaction of creativity, curiosity is something we're going to create here.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Now, speaking about AI, of course, there's been a lot of talk about the rise of AI, and also over the years we have seen traditional degrees, for example. There's a lot of question about whether it still holds a value. I wonder, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, look, AI, and here's how I look at it. AI is going to create what I call job refugees. Because what's going to happen is AI will change jobs, and then people have to move from one job to another. And these refugees need boats, and that boat is education. But the problem is you can't go for a year to go train on AI. So we need much more hybrid, much more agile education. We're moving to an agile future, and we're moving to a gig future.
Yep.
And a gig future deserves a gig education system that doesn't exist today.
Gig education system, can you talk to us? How do you envision that happening? Does it mean more flexibility, shorter period of courses?
I mean, let's say that you are in one of the beautiful buildings in Kuala Lumpur and you're an engineer and your boss has told you, learn about AI. What do you do? I mean, what people are doing right now is cobbling together an educational curriculum by looking at YouTube, right? And you don't know if the person is credible or not. But actually, there's good content on YouTube. You can't be certified for it. Educational institutions both have an opportunity and a duty to step up. Now, just imagine if there were an data and AI course that students could sign up for, not just our students, who of course have first rights to it, but just imagine if students from all over KL, all over Southeast Asia, all over the world could sign up and get a certificate for it. I mean, that doesn't exist. We need to create it, and that's what we're going to create here.
Okay. Now, on that note, there's of course a big disconnect between higher education and jobs. The debate about universities not preparing graduates for employability. I do wonder, like traditional courses like that, are they still relevant, and what are the alternatives if not?
Well, that's where MIT comes in. That's where ASB comes in. Our secret sauce is we are very hands-on.
Okay.
We create companies, we shape companies. Our students go on to lead companies. The professors are not just entrepreneurs, but they work with companies. And that is the essence of ASB. So our students actually do something called action learning. They go work in companies as a part of their degree. They learn from companies. Companies contribute to us. They do research projects here. And that's one of the elements of the dynamic environment we're trying to create here. So the problem with a lot of academia is it tends to diverge from reality. But when you come to places like AI, not only do we want to be converged with what's happening in the real world, we want to lead it. In fact, a lot of AI comes from universities like MIT.
Yep.
And ASB, the faculty are doing amazing research on topics related to AI. And so here is where we want to bridge that skills gap. It's not just a skills gap we want to close. We want to create future skills. In other words, we want to go beyond it. And this is a fundamental thing in our ethos here at the Asia School of Business.
Well, certainly, I think the question right now is, what kind of skills do you equip students and graduates now for them to be prepared for jobs of the future? Where do you think traditional institutions lack at this point in time? And for employers' perspective, is it still relevant to have a 4-year degree?
I think an undergraduate degree, if you can afford it, is fantastic, and if it's good. And I'm not one to write it off. I certainly didn't tell my daughter, don't do an undergraduate degree. I believe deeply in it, but it's got to be done right. And the good schools do a great job of it. You learn core skills, you learn the humanities. Humanities are very important. It builds your character, builds your personality. You learn about geopolitics, you learn about political history. These are all very important. Of course, you learn science, you learn math. Math is very fundamental to AI. So I'm not one to write off the undergraduate degree, but I think we should not let higher education off the hook. They need to do a better job of A, motivating it, B, teaching it in a way that students actually understand it, and C, making sure they're relevant to the real world, towards what people need in their job. But often, it's called the ivory tower. Higher education institutions are removed from reality. Now, we do not do undergraduate education. We do graduate education, MBAs, and that is relevant because we give students core skills that prepare them for a very uncertain future. How to break down a problem, how to analyze, how to negotiate, how to understand what the needs are, right? How to develop a product, how to do the finance, how to look at the implications of innovation. So these are core skills, and it prepares them. It's like if you don't know which sport you're going to play, you better have very good core strength and very good flexibility. You better do your yoga, So this is what we do in the master's degree here, and I hope undergraduate degrees will do. But then in their lives, they're going to have to constantly pivot and be very, very flexible. And that is what I call quaternary education. And that has to be the new reality.
And do you see that happening globally?
I don't see it happening, but if it doesn't happen, we're in deep trouble. And we will make it happen here at the Asia School of Business.
Okay. Now, speaking of the Asia School of Business, I think the question for a lot of professionals, young professionals looking to pursue an MBA is whether is it still worth it or not? No, with the time, effort, and money that put into this kind of education, I do wonder what would be your comment on that for those wondering to MBA or not to MBA, or do not see the value in it anymore.
So let's say that you run a travel agency. It's doing quite well. And you, your parents set it up. You are the smart, young leader of this agency. Now you're confronting things like artificial intelligence. You're in competition with Agoda or with Travelocity. You're trying to figure out where to fundraise from. You're trying to figure out what your valuation should be. You're trying to figure out if there's someone wants to acquire you, whether the price they're paying is worth it.
Right.
You're trying to figure out how to involve other technologies. Where do you get the answers to that? And in order to really examine these questions in a systematic way and not be taken to the cleaners, as it were, you need to have a very, very good core understanding of how businesses operate, how our financial institutions operate, what finance is, what management is. And this is what you learn here. That's what I mean by core skills. You know, if you ever want to be an athlete, whether you're going to be a weightlifter or a badminton player or a tennis player, you need to work on your core strengths, your core flexibility, and that's what the MBA gives. But that does not mean that you're going to be ready for life, because life is full of pivots, and that's the quaternary component of education that we're going to help create, which I think the world desperately needs. Those are the boats that will take job refugees from their old jobs to their new jobs.
Can you talk to us then a bit about the programs that's offered at ASB?
Yeah. So we have 3 degree programs, and we have lots of non-degree programs. So the degree programs are, we have an MBA, which has 2 pieces to it, either the executive MBA, which is for working professionals who want to do it on a part-time basis, or for full-time MBAs who are willing to take a year off, come here, immerse themselves, and leave transformed. So that's the MBA. The MBA is a transformative experience to prepare you for management. Then we have a master's in central banking, which is very unique. And central banking is, of course, what Bank Nagara does, but central banks around the world manage the monetary policies and the financial institutions in their countries. And things like exchange rates, interest rates, all these things are sort of related to that. And they're more and more central as the world becomes global. So we have a nice combination of degrees, but we also have an extensive program of outreach, which is executive education, for working professionals in companies who don't want to get a degree, but just want to learn about how to manage their ESG portfolios, or for that matter, how to handle leadership. They suddenly became leaders.
So is this like a mini accelerated MBA sort of program?
Well, think of it as just a course that you take in something you want. And this is what we're going to start really expanding, right? So it's like certificates for things you learn just in time as you need them, as opposed to a whole degree. Our approach is a topic, the catchment area, the region, and the modality, all 3. So the topic is, for example, get into topics. We already do a lot of stuff in ESG, but artificial intelligence is so pressing. Data science is so pressing, right? And then if you're in a travel agency, the impact of artificial intelligence is going to be very different than if you're a dry cleaning company with a bunch of dry cleaning installations, right? So that's one, the topic. The second is the region. The region we want to go after is not just Malaysia, although Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur are clearly our sweet spot. We also want to go after the rest of ASEAN, India, China, and frankly, many parts of the world. You know, one of the advantages of being Malaysia is being a developing country on the rich side of that spectrum. It still has things like a lot of the gig economy, a lot of hawkers, a lot of the unorganized economy. So it's a petri dish for creating content which is valuable across the world, whether it's Bolivia or Nigeria. And so that's the second thing. But the third is the delivery mechanism. Most universities are stuck in person, and during COVID they rushed into something which isn't very efficient, which is Zoom. And we all dread that Zoom call, don't we? Because it's tiring. But there's a better way to do online, which is to use asynchronous videos. And so it's a very advanced and a nice way to do online with hybrid offerings. And that's the approach we're just beginning to expand on. Turns out that the hybrid approach is better anyway. You know, at the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote a plea to in the World Economic Forum to educators worldwide. I said, please do not assume that going to Zoom is somehow the right way to do online. It is not. The right way to do online is to shoot your video, shoot your course as small videos that your learners can watch in the subway, at home, pause, rewind, rewatch with text, with transcripts. And then the classroom is an interaction. It's a case study, it's a discussion, it's a disputation, it's a lab. You're working on Bloomberg terminals, you're working on something else, right? That's called the flipped classroom. It's a new pedagogy that the world's been just tiptoeing towards, but we have to embrace it full on if we want to achieve the sort of extreme learning outcomes we need in this new reality.
I would like to find out your thoughts then about the role of an educator or a lecturer in that new environment that you've just spoke about.
Yeah, you know, I was talking to my daughter. My daughter often says to me, she's 21, don't lecture me, don't lecture me. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that the word lecture has become slightly negative, and it deserves to be. It deserves to be, because what happens in a lecture is the professor talks and a whole bunch of students are sitting there leaning back, often on, you know, Instagram, right, or whatever it is. And the pedagogy, the cognitive science shows that they don't necessarily learn. The right way to learn is with your hands and with your brains working. So what you do is you take the lecture and put it on video, short 10-minute stints of video, like Khan Academy, Sal Khan did that. When you do that, the student watches the video, they can pause it, they can rewind it. If they lose the, you know, they're not paying attention, they can watch it again. But then when they come to the classroom, you're actually doing something, right? So if you learn about finance, let's analyze the finances of a company. So now you see you're bridging the gap between the theoretical and the real world. So this is called a flipped classroom. And it's a whole new pedagogy. Many of us, I've written books about it, others have as well. And we've been talking about it for about a decade. This is the time to implement it, because we have to make sure that learning is deeply, deeply effective, because we can't afford to mess this up. If the boats that take these job refugees from the old jobs to the new jobs, if they have holes in them, we have a real problem. And the lecture format has a hole in it. And so we want to fundamentally change the pedagogy. So even regular teaching at ASB, we will go hybrid.
You speak to a lot of policymakers, government leaders, education ministers. When you speak to them and you raise all these issues, what are the challenges facing them to implement this kind of changes that you see so clearly is the biggest problem in
Everyone
education?
agrees with this. The teachers agree, the parents agree, the students agree, the ministers agree. Well, it doesn't change. It doesn't change because the system is so baked in, and it takes leadership to change the incentives. It takes leadership to change the way you reward teachers. It takes leadership to change the way you examine outcomes. And it takes a very, very systematic rethinking. And that is the missing link. At ASB, we can do it because, you know, we're a small school. And that's why I was excited about this role. And we're going to do it here. But hopefully it'll be a model that we can take to primary, secondary, tertiary, and as I said, quaternary education.
What is an effective leadership in a world where it's so fast changing? What kind of leadership do you see is essential in this day and age?
So, you know, the old type of leadership is the military style, command and control, right? You make plans, you know, follow plans. And of course you have to make planning, but Dwight Eisenhower had a great quote. He said, I love planning, I hate plans. Because the first casualty of war is a plan. So the alternate form of leadership is agile leadership, where the leader is not the leader per se, the leader is simply the cheerleader. The team is empowered to see the future, contribute ideas, pick the right idea, test, pivot, learn, and move on. And it's a very different form of leadership. And startups are moving in this direction. That's why startups often eat the lunch of large companies. But this is what we hope to achieve here with our extraordinary team.
Do you describe that as your leadership style?
I think so, yeah, I would, yeah.
Okay, all right. Now, with the advancements in AI and language models, which I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is, of course, just one of the things that we're seeing. I'm curious, Sanjay, what do you think in the MBA curriculum do you think are becoming less relevant and should be changed?
Actually, the MBA curriculum is a bigger question. The MIT MBA curriculum is very unique, and that's the one we use here at the Asia School of Business. As you probably know, MIT professor, we have fantastic colleagues, faculty here. They teach most of the courses, but a whole bunch of MIT professors come and teach many of the other courses. So, and we follow the MIT curriculum. Our students actually also go to MIT for 3 weeks in an MIT immersion. They get taught there as well. So our ethos is very MIT. The MIT curriculum is very unique, actually. The core is very limited. The curricular core is very limited, and there are lots of electives. The core has some things that you will need regardless of what you do. Operations, you know, ethics, marketing, right? You have finance. You have to do that anyway. And GPT is going to impact those fields individually. And we're working very much on that. In fact, very soon we'll be launching something called the AI Observatory, where where people can come in and see what's happening in all these fields because of artificial intelligence. So that's the MIT curriculum. Where we have an advantage is electives. So we have a lot of electives, and the electives can morph over time, you know. I mean, this is what, 2023 June, right? I mean, 2022 June, there was no ChatGPT. Today, it's the three most recognized letters in the world probably
How
are
would you
GPT.
think advanced language models like that, how do you think it would change the world? Let's talk about June 2024. How would it look like?
A couple of ways. I think that you will see a lot of bots take over tedious jobs. I think that's going to be huge, and that's going to create this job migration.
Yep.
Employees who are doing one thing will have to do something else, and we've got to train them because the bots will take their place. So that's one very fundamental thing. The other thing is a lot of in the small businesses, gig economy, individuals will use bots to give them superhuman powers, right? It's like Spider-Man, you know? And these superhuman powers will make the gig economy even faster because these individuals can do things. Companies are going to be a little bit leery of using AI because of the liability issues, but individuals can. So it's a very interesting force balance, a sort of an equalizer.
In an AI-powered world, which are learning, reasoning, and making decisions much faster than human being, where does it leave us in terms of leadership as a person?
Look, GPT cannot negotiate a contract. It can't figure out how to create an ESG platform. It cannot create a strategy. ESG cannot coach an employee. I'm sorry, GPT. AI cannot help take a young recruit and make them a future leader. Human skills are exceptional, you know. So I have little doubt. The doubt I have is, can people learn those skills? And therefore this quaternary education, right? I really think that learning is going to become the oxygen of the new economy, because otherwise individuals who cannot move from one job to another, they will fall prey to these bots.
This is something that's unique to Malaysia. There was a recent survey. Half of them said that I don't want to continue my tertiary education. It's either they can't afford to or they do not want to. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, shame on us. We got to fix that, right? If I produce movies that people don't want to watch, then I'm the producer, then I've got to change the movies I produce. And so from an education perspective, I think educators have to look at themselves in a mirror first. And that's point number one. Point number two, if they're actually dropping out after school, then we better make school very potent, which is secondary education, right, and primary education. So that's sort of one lesson. That said, I think that if you take the example of bank tellers, all right, so when ATMs first entered the market, people thought bank tellers' jobs will go away. Instead, they did not. What ended up happening was bank tellers who simply handed out cash started selling mortgages, CDs. So the cognitive level of the job went up. And the number of bank tellers who had bachelor's degrees went up. So I think that on the one hand, we need to make education more attractive and look at ourselves in the mirror. But on the other hand, what I'll say to young students is, if GPT is a tiger chasing you, you've got to outrun it. You outrun it by enhancing your cognitive level. And that means you probably need a degree, but get the right degree, because not all degrees are created equal.
Critics often question the affordability of prestigious institutions like the MIT, and I do wonder if what are you doing to improve accessibility to such a prestigious and important program as one that's offered by ASB?
So the ASB MBA is actually very inexpensive compared to, it's a one-year program. And it's very inexpensive compared to all the elite MBAs in this region, and actually anywhere in the world. It's probably one of the most affordable. And remember, with an ASB MBA, one can actually go to MIT or Oxford or Yale and other places and get a second degree or diploma. MIT, interestingly, is actually very successful. Although the MIT tuition is high, the vast majority of MIT students get financial aid. And the vast majority graduate with, I think the median debt is $20,000. And the starting salary is much, much, much higher. So MIT does okay. But I think runaway tuitions are a deep contagion and problem in education. And so education, coming back to my earlier point, has to look itself in the mirror and say, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Are we effective? And how do we make it better? And this is a challenge that I place in front of all educators. And if we can't make ourselves attractive to students, we have to look at ourselves. So I think that's a valid point. and it's something educators have to really take seriously.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sanjay, for sharing your thoughts. Appreciate it, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.